The first sound I remember is the echo of my shoes on the church hall's floor. A summer thunderstorm was rattling at the windows, but inside, everything was steady and cold. They had brought me up there, in front of the community, during one of those meetings that was a mix of scripture and local politics. My mum sat pale-faced in the third pew, hands balled into tight fists. Around her clustered the aunts, uncles, cousins, faces I had known forever but who now looked strange. Pinched, accusatory. They weren't cruel people, not properly, but that night their words felt sharp. Pastor Brendan called it concern, but the way he removed his glasses and set them on the lectern felt just like taking off armor before a fight. My sketches were tucked under my arm, a few swirls of chiffon, some outlandish cuts, notes about fabrics I'd never touched, and he asked me to unfold them for everyone to see. Muffled titters ran up the sides of the room. The local butcher, Mr. Ryan, made a snorting sound, and I could tell from the way his wife's jaw was set that she thought he was going too far, but she didn't stop him. My Uncle Grant leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "So this is it, eh, Megan?" He jabbed a thumb toward the drawings. "You think you're gonna make it big with pretty dresses?" I wondered what it looked like to everyone else. Me standing there, rent-faced, awkward, making my dreams public so they could all prod and poke them. The pastor's voice was soft, but the softness crooned with the sort of sacrificial worry older folks have when they're confident you are throwing your life away. "Fashion is hardly a foundation, Megan," he said, pushing the word fashion out as if it tasted of smoke. "Why not something steady? Why not join the pharmacy like your cousin Lila? We're only worried, you understand." Their faces swam before me in the yellow light. Behind all the scolding and dismissals, there was the smugness of people who believe they're right. What if they were? My chest felt heavy and hot. I didn't say anything. I just listened while the words fell in like rain. I kept my chin up, but something in me hated being seen. That was the humiliation, standing there as they each decided, with various shades of pity and laughter, that I was delusional, destined to return someday for forgiveness and a small job in town. Later. In the kitchen, Mum tried to comfort me as she washed the dinner dishes. "They just want you safe, Meg, that's all." She didn't look at me, so I couldn't tell if she meant it. I left the next day. Sydney waited, huge and indifferent. It didn't matter if I was humiliated here. If I was going to be invisible, let it be in the city where dreams grew like weeds through the cracks. The city didn't welcome me. My first year was a string of cheap sublets and frantic fumbled jobs. Waiting tables, folding t-shirts at a chain clothing store, scrubbing coffee stains off cafe floors. Those first 9 months, my hands learned what tired meant. I spent weekends hunched over my second-hand sewing machine, eyes fuzzed from lack of sleep, fingers stabbed by pins, sewing and ripping and sewing again. I took night classes at the technical college, learning to draft patterns. I scribbled in notebooks on the train, drawing silhouettes in the grease-smudged windows. On Sundays, the city's heart slowed, and I'd walk Clark Street, staring into the high-windowed shops, watching glossy silhouettes in perfectly lit windows, dresses I couldn't afford to so much as touch. Sometimes people brushed past me in little clusters, swinging branded handbags. I memorized what I saw. My ambition felt like a fever. Whenever I heard their voices, the pastor's careful sternness, Grant's lazy sneer, I pictured them in those pews, still convinced the world revolved around their version of ordinary. That humiliation lived sharp in my bones. It became the weight that kept me pressing on, night after night. Even when my knuckles ached, I submitted my portfolio everywhere. Most times I heard nothing back. A few sent form letters, polite but cold. One rainy morning, just when I'd resigned myself to scraping together rent for another week, a studio answered. Olsen Tate, a tiny place run by two women with sharp eyes. Their atelier was upstairs from a Vietnamese bakery, its stairwell perfumed with cinnamon and pork buns. They let me apprentice for nothing, just in exchange for my time, my labor, and my stubbornness. I swept floors, hemmed sample lines, ran hundreds of errands, but at night they let me work in the far corner of the studio, piecing together my own designs from offcuts and discards. Saskia Olsen taught me the ruthless precision of tailoring. "No magic," she would say, clenching pins in her teeth. "Just measure and remeasure." She let me show her my sketches. She pointed out all their flaws, then told me to start over, and I did. Every criticism was a sour gulp of medicine, but I drank it down. I wore her disapproval the way some women wore pearls. Months blurred. The city changed with me. I started to recognize trends before they happened, to see how colors and lines shaped moods on the street. Sydney was an electric, dazzling tide, pulling forward and out. Sometimes, folding fabrics late at night, I would remember the hall and the careful cruelty in those familiar faces. It didn't hurt any less, but it kept me moving. My first real commission arrived like a dare. A client at Olsen Tate eyed one of my pieces, a jacket with impossible seams and a wild bright lining, and insisted on buying it. It was barely ready, but the editors at an arts magazine took photos. More commissions came, then more. Soon, word got around. I kept working, always the last to leave the studio, finishing my own line well after midnight. Success didn't flare up overnight, but I watched it accrue piece by aching piece. A glowing review in a fashion blog, then a shout-out by a Sydney stylist with too many followers to count. My Instagram flooded. People wanted to know what inspired me, how I'd started. I never told them about the church hall, or the humiliation, the laughter, or Grant's smirk. No one wants to hear about hating the people you love. Years spun. The city became familiar. I took on assistants, then a full-time staff. We rented a proper space and gave it my name, Megan Hollis Studio. My designs made their way to runways. I felt it all the way down to my feet. The work becoming real, my life evolving from invisible hours into fabric and shape and color. It was news big, Sydney-wide news, when the Fashion Week invitation arrived. I opened the letter in my office, hands trembling. I could see the sunlight glinting off the skyscrapers outside my window, the morning already humming with heat. I walked around the block 4 times just to clear my head before calling Mom. I hadn't been home in years, except for quick visits, holidays, a rushed Easter morning, stilted reunions around tables, heavy with roast and gravy. Each trip brought back the shame. I was still the girl from the hall, standing bare before people who measured lives in mortgage payments and steadiness. They asked about my work, nodded with polite confusion, then changed the subject. But the fashion show, this was different. The whole city would see. The press invites were public, and for the first time, I wanted everyone, family, Grant the pastor, to come. I wanted them to see what they doubted, so I sent invitations, expensive cardstock with gold letters to every address I remembered. I wrote a little note for Mom, no bitterness in my words. Sydney in late September glimmers with that just before summer hope. The night of the show, the air was sharp and modern and smelled of magnolia from the city gardens. The venue was a clean, glass-walled room overlooking Darling Harbor. Spotlights blazed. Beyond the huge windows, boats glided on the water. Backstage, my models buzzed around, swan-like and elegant, stepping into dresses I had pinned and unpinned and remade 100 times. The racks shimmered with color. A gown in pale silk, a jacket in deep midnight blue with silver stitch, pants cut so sharp they looked like water. My name hovered everywhere, on the press cards, on little signs, in people's mouths. "Megan Hollis," they said, like it was something to taste. From behind the curtain, I picked out my family. Mum had dressed up, wore a navy dress I'd sent her for Christmas 2 years before. She gripped her handbag, stiff as a statue. Beside her sat Uncle Grant, his belly pushing at the buttons of a suit, his face set in something between confusion and pride. Aunt Lila, Cousin Tommy. Even Mr. Ryan was there, looking shocky in a jacket. The pastor had come, gray now. Leaning on a younger man's arm, my heart galloped. The shame I'd carried for years flickered up my chest. What would they see? Could they know what it cost? The lights dimmed. Music started, a deep,